Moonlight spilled through the dense canopy, casting silver streaks over the forest floor. She moved silently, her bare feet brushing against moss and fallen leaves, yet even in shadow, she could feel the weight of every pair of eyes that dismissed her. Everyone assumed she was nothing more than an Omega, a shadow in her own pack, a presence tolerated at best. Her chest tightened as whispers floated past, subtle jabs she had learned to ignore, yet they gnawed at her nonetheless. Typical Omega behavior. Someone muttered, laughter threading the words. She clenched her fists, forcing a calm she did not feel. Even as the pack celebrated another of their alpha's victories, she remained on the edge unnoticed. Yet beneath her quiet exterior, a fire simmered, one she had carefully learned to hide. She had learned early that showing strength as an Omega invited ridicule, or worse, jealousy. Then, as if drawn by instinct, a presence lingered just beyond the edge of the clearing. A pair of golden eyes, sharp and assessing, watched her from the shadows. She did not know him yet, but his gaze burned with something she could not name. Curiosity and fear twined together in her chest. She could feel her pulse quicken. Don't even think about stepping out of line. A sneering voice whispered from the group of pack members nearest her. She forced a smile, bowing her head in deference. Yet as the words landed, she felt a strange surge, not of anger exactly, but of awareness. Her senses tingled, her claws itching with barely restrained energy, as though the forest itself was aligning with her heartbeat. It was dangerous, of course. Revealing even a hint of her hidden power could draw scrutiny, and she had learned the hard way that scrutiny often led to humiliation. But tonight, the pull was undeniable. The Alpha, whose name she had only ever heard in reverent whispers, was watching. His expression unreadable, he lingered on the edge of her consciousness, a shadow that refused to leave. She blinked, trying to shake the sensation, but the fire within refused to die. One day, she promised herself silently, one day they would all see her for what she truly was. One day, the pack would kneel not because she was weak, but because she was the only one who could stand when they fell. A sudden rustle in the underbrush broke her concentration. Her pulse shot upward, and instinctively she crouched, eyes scanning for danger. But the figure that emerged was not an enemy. It was someone who, she sensed instinctively, might hold a key to the truth she had kept hidden all her life. The moon above seemed to pulse in tandem with her heartbeat. Something was coming, something that would change everything, and she, the Omega of shadows, would have to step into a light she had never imagined. The scent of pine and damp earth clung to the clearing as the pack gathered under the ceremonial torches, their flames flickering like judgmental eyes. She stepped lightly onto the open ground, every muscle taut, every heartbeat echoing in her ears. Tonight, the elders were to name the new hunting pairs, a ritual that should have been meaningless for an Omega like her. But she could feel the weight of scrutiny pressing down, heavier than any pack punishment. Her name was called last, as always, a quiet murmur swallowed by the collective voices of the pack. Laughter followed. Typical Omega. Someone jeered, the words sharp enough to cut through steel. She lowered her gaze, lips pressed into a thin line, forcing herself not to flinch. The Alpha was there, standing apart, his posture impossibly straight, eyes like molten gold as they swept across the gathering. His presence alone made the whispers fade slightly, but his attention was not yet on her, or so she told herself. Still, something about the way he watched left her chest fluttering, a strange combination of dread and anticipation she had never felt before. The elder called for volunteers, and as always, she remained rooted in silence. Then, in a cruel twist of attention, a packmate smirked and loudly suggested, maybe she should carry the torches instead of hunting. Don't strain yourself, little Omega. Laughter erupted, and her cheeks burned with shame. Her tail twitched against her legs, betraying the fire rising within her. Why do they always see only what they want? She thought bitterly, but she forced herself to bow her head, the practiced submission keeping her body safe, even as her spirit roared in silent defiance. And then, as if fate had decided to amuse itself, the Alpha's gaze fell upon her. It was not judgmental nor amused. There was curiosity there, a spark of something unspoken. She held his look for a heartbeat too long, and for a fraction of a second she felt seen. Not as an omega, not as a joke, but as something more. Something dangerous, something capable. The ceremony dragged on. Each announcement a reminder of her supposed inferiority. Each laugh a dagger, twisting deeper. She could feel the weight of eyes, the sting of whispered taunts, and yet beneath it all, the embers of her inner strength glowed hotter. One day, they would see her not as weak, but as someone they could not ignore. A sudden, sharp laugh cut through the murmurs. The rival who had tormented her for weeks stepped forward, deliberately bumping her shoulder. "Careful, Omega," he sneered. "Wouldn't want to trip in front of our esteemed Alpha." Her breath caught. The forest seemed to hush. Even the torches seemed to flicker in anticipation. She lifted her chin, and for a fleeting moment, the crowd saw the flicker of fire that she usually kept buried. The Alpha's eyes narrowed, the faintest smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth, and she realized with a jolt. He was watching, and not just casually. Something about her defiance had piqued him. The tension hung like a storm cloud, electric and suffocating. And as the ceremony ended, the whispers followed her like shadows, but one pair of eyes stayed locked on her, golden, unyielding, and dangerous. The forest at dusk was alive with shadows, the wind whispering secrets through the swaying branches. She walked the narrow path that led away from the pack clearing, trying to shake off the sting of the ceremony. Her chest still burned from humiliation, her tail twitching in irritation, but the lingering presence of the Alpha's golden gaze haunted her thoughts. Why does he watch me like that? She wondered, a mixture of dread and curiosity curling in her stomach. A sudden rustle made her freeze. The leaves parted, and a figure emerged, a stranger unlike any she had ever seen. Tall, cloaked in muted gray, with eyes that seemed to pierce straight through the layers of her carefully constructed defenses. Her instincts screamed, yet something in his calm, measured aura disarmed her. "You shouldn't be here," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, though the tension in her stance made it sharp. He tilted his head, a faint smile playing at the corner of his lips. "Perhaps," he replied, voice low and smooth, carrying a knowledge that seemed impossibly old. "Or perhaps I was meant to find you." Her pulse quickened. Something about him was familiar, yet foreign. Her senses, usually so reliable, buzzed with unease and something more, something electric. She could feel the stirrings of her hidden strength, a subtle pulse beneath her skin, awakening at his presence. How does he know? The stranger took a slow step forward, his eyes locking with hers. "You are not what they say you are," he murmured. "The pack, the Alpha, they only see shadows, but I see the truth beneath." Her heart skipped. For years, she had hidden, masked, and silenced herself to survive among those who underestimated her. And yet, here was someone who seemed to recognize the spark she had buried so deep. The forest seemed to hold its breath around them, the twilight amplifying the tension that wrapped around her like chains. I don't know what you mean," she said cautiously, though curiosity flared despite her caution. He let out a sound that was almost a sigh, like a breeze stirring dry leaves. "You carry a legacy they cannot comprehend. Royalty flows in your veins, and soon they will realize it too, though perhaps not before enemies rise to challenge it." Her head spun, royalty, her veins. The words should have felt like a lie, yet something deep within her resonated, a chord struck by recognition she couldn't ignore. Her claws itched beneath her fingertips, her fur bristling with a flicker of the power she'd long kept hidden. The stranger stepped back, fading into the shadows once more. "Watch carefully," he said over his shoulder. "The ones who humiliate you today may tremble tomorrow." Before she could respond, he was gone, swallowed by the forest. She was left alone, heart racing, senses alive with something she had never felt before. The taste of destiny, the pull of a secret that could not stay buried forever. And as the first stars blinked awake overhead, she knew with chilling clarity that nothing in her life would ever be the same. The morning mist clung to the forest floor, curling around gnarled roots like ghostly fingers. She moved carefully, each step deliberate, her senses sharper than ever after the encounter with the stranger. His words had settled into her mind like seeds waiting to bloom. Royalty flows in your veins. It was impossible to ignore the pulse of power she had long buried, a dormant force stirring beneath her skin. By the time she reached the old pack hall, her hands were trembling not from fear, but from the anticipation of discovery. She had heard whispers of relics left behind by the old pack leaders, objects said to hold secrets, even prophecies. And today, compelled by curiosity she could not resist, she began searching. Her fingers brushed against the smooth, cool surface of a carved wooden box hidden beneath a dusty shelf. The intricate markings shimmered faintly under her touch, as if recognizing her presence. With a deep breath, she opened it. Inside lay a small medallion, etched with symbols she didn't recognize, and a folded parchment yellowed with age. Her eyes widened as she read. The words confirmed what she had only dared to imagine. Her lineage was not that of a common Omega. She was of royal blood, descended from a line of leaders whose power and authority had been hidden for generations. A surge of both pride and fear coursed through her, and she felt her claws dig into the wooden floor instinctively. She was not weak. She had never been weak. The pack had only seen what they wanted, and now she finally understood why her instincts had always been sharper, her senses keener, her aura different. Footsteps behind her made her spin around. The Alpha stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes unreadable but intense. "You found it," he said simply, though his voice carried a weight she couldn't decipher. She swallowed hard, clutching the medallion. I didn't know it existed. Her words faltered under his gaze. He stepped closer, the tension between them electric. "You always knew you were different," he said, his tone low, almost a whisper, "and now so does the world. Do you understand what that means?" Her breath hitched. The thought of revealing her secret to the entire pack, of standing as something more than an Omega, terrified her, and yet, beneath the fear, there was a thrill, a dangerous, exhilarating pull she couldn't resist. The Alpha's golden eyes softened, just for a moment, as if acknowledging her inner struggle. "Be careful," he murmured, "not everyone will welcome the truth." Her gaze dropped to the medallion in her hands. She could feel the power coursing through it, awakening something long dormant, and as the Alpha turned and left without another word, she realized the world had shifted beneath her paws. Shadows that had once hidden her were gone. Secrets beneath the fur were now alive, and the pack, the stranger, and even the Alpha would never see her the same way again. A chill ran down her spine, but this time it was anticipation, not fear. She was ready, or at least she would have to be. The pack grounds were quiet that evening, the usual chatter replaced by a tense undercurrent that made her skin prickle. Shadows stretched long under the rising moon, and the air carried the scent of anticipation and danger. Ever since she had discovered her royal bloodline, whispers had begun to follow her, soft and subtle, brushing against her ears like silk, yet leaving tiny cuts in their wake. She moved with careful steps through the clearing, avoiding the gaze of most pack members, though she could feel their eyes on her anyway. They sensed the shift, the subtle change in her presence. Some whispered in awe, others in fear, and a few in jealousy that bit sharper than the cold night air. Then from the shadows she felt it, the gaze of the Alpha. He was closer than usual, silent yet commanding, his eyes fixed on her with a quiet intensity that made her pulse race. She wanted to look away, to pretend nothing was stirring between them, but her body betrayed her. Every nerve screamed in his direction, a forbidden connection threading between them that neither dared speak aloud. "You shouldn't wander alone," he murmured, stepping from the shadows. His voice was soft, yet it carried a weight that pulled at her chest. "I can handle myself," she replied, though the tremor in her voice betrayed her. Her hands clenched at her sides, feeling the latent power within her pulse like a heartbeat in the air. "You're more than capable," he said, his eyes glinting in the moonlight, "but that doesn't mean I won't notice if someone else tries to take what's yours, or what belongs to me." Her stomach twisted. The words were dangerous, layered, and she could feel the subtle implication that went beyond protection. It was a claim, a warning, and a promise all at once. She struggled to keep her composure, forcing herself to meet his gaze. A soft laugh drifted through the clearing, an arrival, always lingering, always scheming, slid from the shadows, eyes narrowing. They whispered something sharp, the words meant to provoke, to unsettle. She ignored them, though a small flash of irritation sparked. Her focus remained on the alpha. He stepped closer, so close that she could feel the warmth radiating from him, and the subtle brush of his presence sent shivers down her spine. "Whispers follow you," he said quietly. "They always have, but soon, they'll follow us." She swallowed, heart pounding. His words were a promise she didn't yet understand, but the tension between them was undeniable. It was dangerous, forbidden even, yet irresistibly magnetic. Every glance, every subtle movement carried weight, and she could feel her pulse racing in response, syncing with his in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. The night deepened, and with it came the understanding that their connection could no longer remain hidden. Whispers were no longer just rumors. They were threads, weaving a bond between them that neither could deny, no matter how much the pack or tradition demanded restraint. Her breath caught as he finally stepped back, shadows swallowing his form. "Stay alert," he murmured, voice low, "because the ones who ignore the danger in you today will pay for it tomorrow." And with that, he was gone, leaving her alone beneath the silver light of the moon, heart racing and senses alight, knowing that the forbidden tension threading between them had only just begun. The dawn broke over the pack grounds in muted streaks of gold and silver, the morning mist curling around the bases of the ancient trees like fingers reaching for secrets. She moved with deliberate caution, every step heavy with anticipation. The events of the previous nights, the stranger, the discovery of her lineage, the forbidden glances with the alpha, had left her senses taut, alert, and uneasy. She knew that today would test her in ways she had not imagined. The pack gathered in the central clearing, the tension in the air almost tangible. Elders, hunters, and even the Omega ranks had taken their places, their eyes flicking toward her as though waiting for a misstep. And there at the center stood the Alpha. His golden gaze swept over the gathering, finally resting on her with a quiet intensity that made her stomach tighten. "You have grown bold, Omega," he said, his voice low but carrying across the silent clearing. Perhaps too bold for someone who has always lived in the shadows. Her pulse quickened, every muscle coiled ready, but she forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, refusing to bow. "I am who I am," she replied, voice calm despite the heat rushing through her chest. "And I will not hide forever." A ripple of murmurs passed through the pack. Some eyes widened in surprise, others flickered with suspicion. It was unheard of for an Omega to speak with such defiance in the Alpha's presence. The Alpha's lips curved in the faintest smirk. "Words are meaningless without proof. You claim strength, then show it." Suddenly, he stepped forward, the motion deliberate, challenging. "Prove your worth in the trial, lead a hunting pair, show the pack why you deserve to be seen as more than what they claim." Her heart pounded. This was not merely a test of skill, it was a public declaration, an exposure that could either solidify her place or humiliate her further. Yet beneath the fear, the spark of determination she had long buried flared into life. As the pack divided into hunting teams, she was assigned 2 reluctant hunters. Their eyes carried doubt, even disdain, but she ignored it. Her pulse sharpened, instincts guiding her every movement. She led the way into the forest, each step measured, each decision deliberate. The Alpha's eyes followed from the clearing's edge, unwavering, golden, and intense, observing every choice she made, every calculated risk she took. And in those moments, she felt something undeniable, a recognition, a bond forming quietly, almost invisibly, beneath the tension of their roles. By the time they returned, the hunt successful and unblemished, the pack's whispers had shifted. There was admiration now, a hesitant respect mingled with disbelief. She had proved herself without a word beyond the Alpha's challenge. He stepped forward, closing the distance between them, his gaze softening just enough to make her pulse quicken. "You are stronger than they ever imagined," he said quietly, and though the words were simple, They carried the weight of something far more dangerous, something neither of them fully understood yet. A soft wind rustled the leaves, and she realized, with a thrill she could not suppress, that their connection had deepened, forged in public scrutiny and shadowed tension. And as the pack dispersed, she knew the trials were only beginning, and the Alpha's challenge had set a path that neither of them could turn away from. The pack hall was unusually silent that evening, the usual chatter of hunters and elders replaced by an uneasy tension that pressed down on her shoulders. She had sensed it all day, the hushed glances, the subtle shifting of positions, the faint murmurs that stopped whenever she passed. Something was coming, though she could not yet see it. Then it happened. The elder who had once dismissed her with a wave of his hand stepped forward, holding an ancient scroll she had never seen before. His voice, steady but carrying a weight that froze her blood, echoed through the hall. "It has come to our attention that our Omega is not as she seems, her lineage is. Extraordinary." A collective gasp rippled through the pack. Eyes widened, jaws slackened, and whispers exploded into frantic murmurs. She felt as though the room itself had shifted beneath her paws. Royal blood, extraordinary lineage, her heart hammered in disbelief, yet deep inside, a spark of validation flared. She had always felt different. She had always known she carried a power beyond what the pack could see. The Alpha stepped forward, his expression unreadable, yet his golden eyes never left hers, it seems. He said quietly, his voice carrying through the tense silence, that the Omega we underestimated is no ordinary pack member. Her chest tightened, a swirl of pride and fear battling inside her. Allies looked at her with awe, uncertain whether to bow or stare. Enemies, those who had mocked and belittled her, glared with thinly veiled rage, their claws itching metaphorically at the revelation. "Your bloodline," the elder continued, traces back to the leaders of this pack long before even the Alpha's ancestors. "You are royalty, whether you accept it or not." A shiver ran down her spine. Royalty had never seemed real, yet here it was, thrust upon her with undeniable authority. Her thoughts raced, and for a fleeting moment she wanted to retreat, to hide in the shadows where she had always been safe. But the eyes of the Alpha anchored her, a steady, unyielding force that reminded her of her own potential. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "This changes everything, and yet, it doesn't change who you are, not really, but the pack your rivals will see you differently now. You must be prepared." Her pulse quickened as reality sank in. Power, respect, fear, envy. It all radiated from those around her. She was no longer just the Omega who could be ignored. She was a force, a challenge, a legacy waiting to be claimed. A murmur from the back of the hall drew her attention. Her rival, the one who had tormented her for weeks, stepped forward, eyes narrowed and teeth bared in a snarl. "So this is why the Alpha has been watching you." He spat, voice dripping venom. "A pretender hiding behind lies and shadows. We will see how you fare now, princess." Her claws itched, but she held herself steady, letting the fear and anger coalesce into controlled resolve. The Alpha's hand brushed briefly against hers, a subtle yet electric reminder that she was not alone. The revelation had shifted the entire pack, changed the rules, and drawn a line between the past and what was coming. And as the moonlight spilled through the tall windows, touching her face, she realized with both dread and exhilaration that nothing, neither mockery, nor enemies, nor even the Alpha's magnetic presence, would ever let her remain in the shadows again. The full moon hung low over the pack grounds, its silver light painting long shadows that seemed to slither across the trees. She prowled the outskirts of the clearing, senses taut, every rustle of leaves and distant howl amplified in her mind. Since the revelation of her royal bloodline, the pack had shifted. Some eyes now looked at her with awe, others with barely concealed envy, and tonight she could feel danger lurking where she least expected it. A whisper of movement caught her attention. From behind a gnarled oak stepped the rival who had tormented her for weeks, his eyes gleaming with malice. "So," he said smoothly, "the little Omega thinks she can rise above us now. Royal blood or not, some things never change." She narrowed her eyes, the pulse of her hidden strength simmering just beneath her skin. "I am not the same Omega you've mocked," she replied evenly, "and you would do well to remember that." He smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I remember. That's why I've been waiting. For the perfect moment to make sure the pack remembers too." Her stomach tightened, instinct screamed at her, a premonition that this was no ordinary challenge. It was a trap. And yet she could not retreat, not now, not when the stakes had risen so high. Suddenly, a group of pack members she had considered allies stepped forward, their faces hard, eyes cold. "She's been flaunting her status," one said. "It's destabilizing the pack. We can't allow it." Her heart sank. Betrayal cut sharper than any claw, and for a heartbeat, she felt the weight of isolation press down. But then, the Alpha emerged from the shadows, a silent force of presence. His golden eyes swept over the gathering, locking onto hers, and she felt a surge of courage. Enough. His voice thundered, calm yet impossible to ignore. The pack fell silent, the tension practically electric. "This is not a debate. She is part of this pack. Her bloodline does not make her an enemy. It makes her stronger, and if you can't accept that, then you will answer to me." The rival's jaw tightened, but he did not retreat. Instead, he lunged, claws aimed to intimidate, to dominate. She stepped back instinctively, yet the latent power within her responded, a flicker of energy that made the ground beneath her seem alive. The Alpha moved beside her, protective and unyielding, his presence anchoring her as the rival hesitated for just a heartbeat too long. "You will not touch her," he growled, low and dangerous, his hand brushing hers in a subtle, electric connection that sent a shiver down her spine. "I will not allow it." The rival snarled but backed off, at least for now, eyes burning with hatred and anticipation of future opportunities. The pack shifted uneasily, sensing the tension and the unspoken bond between the Alpha and her. Breathless, she stared at the ground, heart pounding in her chest. Betrayal had come from the inside, and yet she had survived it. She had not just survived. She had proven, even in the face of treachery, that her strength was real, undeniable, and dangerous to those who underestimated her. The Alpha's hand lingered near hers as he led her away from the confrontation. "This is only the beginning," he murmured, voice soft yet edged with warning. "There are those who will try to tear you down, but I will stand with you." And in that moment, beneath the silver glow of the moon, she understood. She was no longer an Omega, no longer just a shadow. She was power, she was royalty, and the pack had better learn to respect that or face the consequences. The forest was alive with the scent of damp earth and pine, the moonlight filtering through the high canopy in silver beams that danced across the underbrush. She moved with silent precision, every step measured, every muscle coiled with anticipation. Tonight was more than a hunt. It was a proving ground, not just for her skill, but for the respect she demanded from the pack and the Alpha who walked silently beside her. Her hunting partners, once skeptical and reluctant, now followed her lead with hesitant obedience. She could feel their eyes on her, testing her resolve, measuring the strength she had long hidden. Her senses, sharpened by both fear and newfound confidence, guided her effortlessly. The forest seemed to bend to her awareness, the whispering winds and rustling leaves aligning with her heartbeat. The Alpha's presence was constant, a shadow at the edge of her vision, a heat she could feel without looking. Each glance between them was charged, a silent acknowledgement of the connection growing between them, forbidden yet undeniable. She caught herself stealing a breath whenever his golden eyes lingered on her, pulse quickening under the intensity of his scrutiny. Suddenly, a scream pierced the night. One of the rival hunters had stumbled into a concealed pit, yelping as they scrambled to safety. Without hesitation, she surged forward, leaping with precision, her claws gripping the edge as she pulled them free. The Alpha followed, his strength steadying the rescued hunter, but his gaze never left hers. "You're incredible," he murmured, his voice low, almost lost in the rustle of leaves. The words made her cheeks warm, yet she held her composure, forcing herself to remain focused on the hunt. The rival, watching from the shadows, hissed under their breath. She felt the surge of power within her, the same spark that had awoken when she discovered her lineage, now blazing brighter with each challenge. Her mind and body moved in harmony, instincts guiding her through traps and obstacles that would have caught lesser hunters unprepared. Finally, they cornered the prey, a massive stag, its hooves pounding the earth in fear. She signaled silently, coordinating the pack with gestures and precise movements. When the final blow came, the alpha's hand brushed hers briefly, a fleeting touch that sent a jolt through her nerves. Breathless and triumphant, she stood amidst the quiet aftermath, feeling the weight of accomplishment settle over her. The pack looked at her differently now, awe and reluctant respect mingling in their expressions. Even the rival, their jaw tight with frustration, had no choice but to acknowledge her prowess. The alpha stepped closer, the golden glow of the moon catching in his eyes. "You led them well," he said, voice low and intimate. "Stronger than any omega I've ever seen. Stronger than many alphas, too." Her pulse hammered at the words, not from the exertion of the hunt, but from the undeniable tension coiling between them. She realized in that quiet, moonlit moment that the hunt had proven more than her skillet had proven her heart, her courage, and the dangerous pull of their forbidden bond. As the pack dispersed to return home, she lingered, heart racing, senses still alive with adrenaline and longing. The alpha's eyes met hers one last time, golden and unwavering, and she understood that the trials were far from over. But the connection between them had deepened irreversibly. The full moon hung high, bathing the forest in silver light that turned every leaf and branch into a glimmering sentinel. The tension was palpable, each breath she took sharp with anticipation. The rival who had long coveted the pack's power and scorned her presence had made his move, rallying discontented members to strike. Tonight, the pack's fragile balance would shatter, and she could feel it in her bones. She moved through the shadows, silent and precise, senses alive. Every rustle, every whisper of the wind, every distant snapping branch sent her instincts into overdrive. Her pulse raced not just from the danger, but from the nearness of the alpha, who stalked beside her like a shadow she could feel but not fully see. The forbidden tension between them thrummed in the air, electric and raw. Then from the underbrush the rival emerged, eyes blazing with hatred, claws gleaming under the moonlight. "So this is the royal little Omega," he snarled, voice cutting through the night. "Time to see if all that talk of strength is just a lie." She squared her shoulders, heart hammering. "I'm not who you think I am," she said, voice low but steady, "and tonight you will see exactly how wrong you are." The alpha moved in tandem, a protective wall, his presence grounding her yet stirring something dangerous in her chest. He growled, low and threatening. "You will not touch her," he said, eyes locking with the rivals. "Not now, not ever." The battle erupted. Claws and teeth clashed, the night air alive with the sounds of combat, yells, and the sharp crack of snapping branches. She moved with fluid precision, instinct guiding her every strike, her hidden power pulsing stronger than ever. Every moment she fought, every dodge and counterstrike, reminded her of the fire that had always burned beneath her calm exterior. At one point she found herself cornered, the rival pressing closer, his hatred palpable. Her lungs burned, her claws slick with exertion, but then she felt it, the alpha's hand on her back, steadying her, anchoring her. His touch ignited a surge of courage she didn't know she had, and with a swift motion, they fought as one, their movements almost instinctively synchronized. Golden eyes met hers, their shared breath mingling, unspoken words passing between them, trust, power, desire. They were not just fighting for survival. They were asserting a bond that had long been forbidden, but was now impossible to deny. Finally, the rival faltered, a calculated strike from the alpha, and her combined effort sending him sprawling to the ground. The forest fell into tense silence, the only sounds their ragged breathing and the whisper of leaves under the moonlight. The alpha turned to her, his expression softening, the intensity giving way to something intimate and consuming. "You've proven yourself," he murmured, voice low and rough, not just to the pack, but to me. Her heart skipped a beat. The moonlight glinted off his golden eyes, and in that moment, with the rival defeated and the pack witnessing, the forbidden tension between them ignited into undeniable passion. She felt it, raw and consuming, as their connection, tested, challenged, and now victorious, could no longer be restrained. The night had been a battle in every sense, but standing there, side by side with the Alpha, she realized that survival was only part of the victory. Their bond had emerged from the shadows, fierce and unbreakable, and nothing would ever let it fade. The first light of dawn filtered through the tall trees, painting the pack grounds in hues of gold and amber. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of earth, pine, and something else, something unspoken yet undeniable. Freedom, claimed and earned, the pack gathered quietly, the tension that had gripped them for weeks now replaced with cautious awe. Today marked the beginning of a new era. She stood at the center, chest lifted, medallion heavy against her fur, a tangible reminder of her royal bloodline. Gone were the whispers of doubt, the sneers of jealousy, the scorn that had once made her flinch. The pack now saw her as she truly was, a force to be reckoned with, a leader in her own right. The Alpha approached, golden eyes softening as they met hers. There was no ceremony, no grand announcement, just the weight of understanding, respect, and something far deeper. His presence alone grounded her. The forbidden tension of their shared past now settled into something fierce, tender, and unshakable. "You've come far," he said quietly, voice low but carrying to her ears like a caress. "Stronger than anyone in this pack, stronger than I could have imagined." Her tail flicked, a subtle sign of her nerves and excitement. "I didn't do it alone," she said, though her gaze lingered on him, acknowledging the bond that had grown through trials, danger, and whispered tension. The Alpha knelt slightly, golden eyes locking onto hers. "Then let us no longer hide what we are meant to be." His hand brushed hers, sending warmth spiraling through her chest, fated, free, and together. The pack watched in silence, understanding dawning as the Alpha and the Omega no longer just an Omega, claimed their connection openly. Murmurs of respect, awe, and cautious admiration spread through the ranks. Allies shifted closer, offering nods of approval. Rivals fell back, grudgingly acknowledging her strength. She lifted her chin, inhaling the crisp morning air, and felt the power that had always simmered beneath the surface finally settle into harmony with her heart. She was no longer hidden, no longer dismissed, no longer alone. Her royal bloodline, her courage, and the bond with her Alpha had fused into a force that the pack could neither ignore nor challenge. The Alpha's gaze softened, warmth and desire flickering in his golden eyes. "The pack has accepted your true status," he murmured, drawing her close, "and I have finally claimed what has always been mine." She pressed against him, heart racing, claws resting gently against his chest. "And you," she whispered, a smile tugging at her lips. The forest around them seemed to sigh, the morning light spilling over them like a blessing. Under the rising sun and the approving gaze of the pack, they stood together, fated, free, and finally, fully unhidden. The Omega of Shadows had become the queen of the pack, her royal lineage recognized, her courage proven, and her mate bond secured. The future stretched out before them, bright, untamed, and theirs to claim, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly whole.